Hello and welcome to the Grammaticus tutorial on horizontal codes. Today we're going to look at this code-based question which often appears on the Lincolnshire GL non-verbal reasoning paper. Now let's have a little look what we're being asked to look at today. In the questions below you have to work out a code. You are given some shapes and the codes that go with them. Decide how the code matches the shapes. Then look at the test shape and find its correct code from the 5 given on the right. Remember to mark the answer on your answer sheet. Now, as with all non-verbal reasoning questions, we need to consider things like shape, shading, line type, position, layering. All of those things are important, and for a complete list, have a look at the video on different types of verbal reasoning question. Okay, let's have a little look at question 1. Well, what we need to do in this type of question is we need to identify some of the codes that we've got over here that have the same letters. So we're going to look at the code shapes we've got over here, and we can see that we've got 2 here that have an M in them. Now, we've got an N here and we've got an O here, and the 2 here are M. Now I need to look at these shapes carefully and see if I can identify what these 2 shapes have got in common rather than that shape and that shape. Well, if I forget about those 2 shapes and just look at those shapes, I can see that they have the same type of shading. This one's got the same type of shading too, but the lines are going in the other direction. So the shading on these 2 almost pencils is the same direction. So because I've got an N for this pencil and an O for this pencil and 2 M's for this pencil, I can gather that the top letter is to do with the colour of the rectangle that we've got there. Now if I go over to my test shape over here, I can see that the rectangle is white. Therefore, the code letter is going to be N for the top code letter. N stands for the white rectangle. I can then cross out any that don't start with an N. And you can see I just have one that starts with an N. So I can circle C. I need to remember to mark that answer on my answer sheet. And then I'm going to cross out question 1. Okay, let's have a look now at question number 2. Well, on question number 2, again I'm going to check and see if I have any letters at the top that are the same. I can see I have an R and I have an R. So again, the 2 middle squares have something in common. Now, I'm going to consider what I've got in each shape. In each shape, I have an oval, but that's in every shape. So it's obviously got nothing to do with that. I'm now going to look at the shapes inside. Well, here I've got 2 circles in both of these, and in this one I've got triangles, and in this one I've got a square. So straight away I can see that circles and circles must stand for R and R. A triangle with a T and a square with a U. If I look at my test shape over here, I can see that I have triangles, so that I know that my first letter is going to be a T. T for triangle. So I'm going to go over to my possible answers over here, and I can see that I have 2 with a T at the top. So I'm going to cross the ones out that haven't got a T at the top. Now I'm going to consider the letters I have at the bottom. Well, I have an S and an S, and I also have a W and a W. If I look at the 2 squares that have an S in them, I can see that the shapes inside both of the ovals I have there are black, whereas the shapes inside the ones with the letter W are white. If I look at my test shape, I can see that it's black. So the second letter of my code is going to be S. So I can mark TS, and then I can go ahead and mark that on my answer sheet. Let's have a little look at question number 3. This time I've got P, N, N, P. Well, again, I've got P and P, and I've got 2 in the middle, N and N, which are the same. Let's look at the ones on the outside this time for a change. P and P, I can see both of them have got arrows, and both of the arrows are pointing in a diagonal, pointing upwards. If I look at the 2 that have an N in the code, the arrow is going diagonally and the arrowhead is pointing downwards. If I consider everything else about these 2 arrows, it's the only thing that I can see between the 2 P's here that they have in common. These currently have 2, they have different arrowheads and they have a different number of lines. So the only thing they have in common is the direction they're pointing. If I look at my code shape over here, I can see that the arrow is pointing down to the left-hand corner like it is in N and N here. So I can confidently say that the first letter of my code is going to be an N. I'm going to cross out any that don't start with an N. And now I'm going to consider the bottom letters. Now if I look at the bottom letters this time, I can see that they're all different. So I'm looking for something that makes all of the arrows different. Well, I noticed before that 2 of the arrowheads are white and 2 of the arrowheads are black. Because I have 2 of them, the codes, that wouldn't account for the codes all being different. I've got to find something else that makes all of the arrows different because all the codes are different. Well, I can also see that in the middle of each of these arrows I have a selection of lines. In this one I have 1, in this one I have 4, here I have 3, and here I've got 2. So on each arrow I have a different number of lines, which would account for the different codes. So X must stand for 2 lines, W must stand for 3, V for 4, and U for 1. If I go over to my test shape over here, I can see that we have 1. Now 1 line is going to be U, so I'm going to mark U on my answer sheet, and then I'm going to find NU on my choices over here, and I can see that NU is here. So I'm going to circle that and then transfer that information onto my answer sheet, and once I've done that, I'm going to cross that off. Now looking back, I can see that I haven't crossed off question 2 here. So it would be a good opportunity for me to go back and check my answer sheet to make sure that I remembered to record A on it. And looking back, yes, I did. So I'm going to go back and cross that off. But keeping a record over here is a really safe way of making sure that we have a record somewhere, so that when we get to the end of a section in the non-verbal reasoning paper, if we think we may have made a mistake recording, we've got all of the answers here and we can go back and quickly make the changes necessary to the answer sheet, but we want to avoid that at all costs. Okay, let's have a little look at question number 4. Okay, question number 4, I'm going to look at those top letters again first, and I can see that I have 2 that have B, and also I have this one and this one that both start with a letter, but they both have a P. I'm going to take the ones that have a B, and I'm going to look at these and see what they have in common. Well, I can see that they've both got this U shape, but the U shape is different. This is a W and this is a single U. If I look at P here, I can see I've got a V, and here I've got sort of almost like a W. So I can't say that that is similar enough. Although it's a similar shape, it's not the same. And for the codes to be the same, they've got to have the same thing on them. So looking carefully at both of these, I can see that the ones that have got a letter B both have a diagonal line across the middle of the shape. The ones with the letter P haven't got that diagonal line. So I think that B stands for a line. If I look at my test shape here, I can see that that's got an arrow on it. Well, if I go over and check P and P, I can see that there's a little arrow here and there's a little arrow here. So that means that it's certainly going to be P at the top. So I'm going to put P in that box there, and I'm going to cross out anything that hasn't got a letter P. Okay, let's have a little look at the bottom. Well, now I've got a C, an E, a G and an F. And remember, if all of the letters are different, it means we're looking for something that's different between all of them. Now, already I've talked about almost what we've got at the end of each of these crosses, and it varies on each of them. So I've got a feeling that's what each of those stand for. So we've got the U shape, must be for C, the V shape must be for E, the curly W, G, and the straight W, F. Well, here I've got the curly W, so I think the curly W, if I look over here, it's a letter G, so my code is going to be PG. Now I look over here, I've got PC, PE, here I've got PG. I'm going to circle it, I'm going to mark it on my answer sheet, and once I've done that, I'm going to cross that out. I hope that's helped. I suggest you now move on and have a little go at completing the accompanying worksheet, and I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.